We often romanticize the idea of a tortured soul who's broken and unavailable in love. But the uncomfortable truth is that many of us actually seek out these types of partners, even when it's destructive to our own well-being. The hidden motive behind this craving is our deep-seated need for validation and love, which is being met by the very people who are least likely to provide it, creating a twisted cycle of self-sabotage. I know this pattern all too well, having been in relationships with challenging partners who left me feeling drained, confused, and wondering why I'm somehow drawn to the very same dynamics, time and time again. In this video, we're going to explore the dark truth behind our seemingly inexplicable desire for emotional unavailability in romantic partners, and what it reveals about the darkest corners of our own inner desperation. The reason we often crave emotional unavailability in our romantic partners is not because we're searching for a challenge, but rather because it validates our own insecurities. Deep down, we may be more afraid of intimacy than we are of being alone. The risk of being vulnerable is often met with a subconscious fear of rejection and exposure. In seeking partners who are emotionally unavailable, we're not only trying to avoid our own emotional pain, but also attempting to prove to ourselves that we're not worthy of genuine connection. What we often mistake for a desire for independence is actually a desperate attempt to regain control over a relationship that we feel is slipping away from us. When we're drawn to people who are emotionally distant, it's not necessarily because we're attracted to the mystique, but because we're trying to escape the emotional exhaustion that comes with confronting our own emotional needs. The irony is that our desire for emotional unavailability often stems from our own inner desperation to be loved and accepted, but rather than facing this truth, we create a false narrative that justifies our avoidance of intimacy. When we're drawn to relationships that consistently crush our emotions, it's rarely about the thrill of the high, but about the desperation to avoid the pain of the low, a masquerade of intensity masquerading as intimacy. Our tendency to pursue emotional unavailability stems from a deep-seated insecurity, not just about being worthy of love, but about being worthy of existing and cling to any validation, no matter how fleeting or suffocating, to alleviate this existential dread. On the surface, it seems counterintuitive that we'd be attracted to partners who control and suffocate us. Yet this dynamic provides an ego-boosting validation that we're so captivating, so irresistible, that another person would dedicate themselves to our emotional captivity. But what's more revealing is the way we self-deceive ourselves into believing that we're not the ones who are damaged, that we're not the ones who need fixing, and by chasing after partners who mirror this self-destructive pattern, we're essentially asking to be rescued, to be saved from our own perceived inadequacies. Emotional unavailability taps into a primal fear of being abandoned, of being alone with our thoughts, our emotions, our true selves, and so we collude in this mutually destructive dance, trading our self-worth for a fleeting sense of security, a false guarantee that we're loved and valued, even when that love and value come at a terrible cost. Ultimately, our desperation for emotional validation reveals a deeper longing for authenticity, for a connection that's unstructured, unscripted, and genuine. But the irony is that we'll only find this kind of connection when we're willing to confront our own demons, our own self-deceptions, and our own profound need for love, validation, and acceptance not from others, but from ourselves. When we continue to attract emotionally unavailable partners, it's a desperate cry for help, a scream that's been muffled by our own need for control over the narrative of our lives. The craving for pain and the inability to let go of toxic relationships reveals a deeper fear, not of rejection, but of being truly seen and understood, and the potential for true intimacy that comes with it. Unconsciously, we're searching for validation, not through real connection, but through the ego-boosting rush we get from being desired, even if that desire is one-sided and unfulfilling. This self-sabotaging pattern is a misguided attempt to prove to ourselves that we're worthy of love, but it only ends up reinforcing our deep-seated insecurities and sabotaging any chance at genuine love and acceptance in the process. In a twisted attempt at self-protection, we convince ourselves that we're the one in control, that we're the ones doing the choosing, when in reality, we're being drawn back to the same toxic patterns because they make us feel something, anything at all, after the numbness of our own emptiness. By constantly falling for the unavailable, we're actually distracting ourselves from the real issue, the fact that we're not yet willing to take the first step towards self-love and acceptance. And that's the one relationship we have full control over. Yet we're too afraid to commit to it. When we find ourselves consistently drawn to partners who demonstrate a pattern of emotional unavailability, it's not a sign of a healthy attraction, but rather a cry for help from our innermost fears and insecurities. We're often unaware of the deep-seated need to be validated and reassured that we're lovable and worthy that fuels our pursuit of these unattainable partners. At a subconscious level, our desire for emotional unavailability stems from a fear of being hurt, but more profoundly, it's a manifestation of our inner struggle for control and power in relationships. Behind the facade of seeking independence lies an insatiable crave for emotional validation and acceptance, the very thing we're unwilling to give ourselves, forcing us down the path of chasing the unattainable and ultimately sabotaging our own happiness. One of the most striking aspects of this pattern is the way we deceive ourselves into believing that our partner's emotional distance allows us the freedom and autonomy we so desperately crave. Meanwhile, we unknowingly surrender our agency and self-worth in the process, trading it for a fleeting sense of validation and connection. We're wired to crave the thrill of the unknown, to the point where we'll settle for a partner who's emotionally unavailable over someone who genuinely desires connection. The truth is, our desire for that unavailable person often stems from a deep-seated longing for validation, a craving for someone to desperately seek us out for acceptance. It's an irony that people will often pursue relationships with toxic partners because, in the end, it's not about the partner at all, it's about fulfilling the unmet needs within ourselves, and the fear that if we open up, we'll be left with nothing. The real motive behind our attraction to emotional unavailability often boils down to a twisted game of control, where we seek to maintain power in a relationship that's fundamentally designed to erode our sense of self-worth. By chasing after someone who's forever out of reach, we're able to mask our own insecurities with this notion that we're somehow special, that we deserve the privilege of being with someone who's unwilling to give themselves fully to another person. It's a masquerade of self-deception, where we convince ourselves that we're the prize, rather than the willing participant in this ongoing drama. In reality, we're often just searching for someone to mirror our own self-fragility, to validate the broken pieces of ourselves that we dare not confront alone. Thank you for joining me on this unflinching exploration of the emotional undertows that drive our choices in love. If you've found this video to be a thought-provoking reflection on the human experience, please give it a like and take a moment to share your own observations in the comments below. And if you're drawn to content that digs deep into the complexities of the human psyche, don't forget to subscribe for more thought-provoking conversations and in-depth analyses.